Metadata. The word is unfamiliar to many of us. And being unfamiliar, its sound puts us off. But in fact, it is only the word that we are unfamiliar with. Each of us has come across metadata in one form or another, even if it is, in a sense, basic metadata. Let us try and understand what this word means and why it is part of a digital humanities module. At a very basic level, metadata is information about data. The prefix meta is derived from Greek. In Greek, it means after or beyond, but it also means about itself, which gives you the meaning data about data. So the next question pops to mind. What do we mean by data? Data, at a very basic level, means pieces of information. These may be statistical quantities, characters, symbols, pretty much anything that can be studied and analyzed. What constitutes data will therefore vary from discipline to discipline, from person to person, although it need not necessarily be studied for it to be regarded as data. As mentioned earlier, all of us have surely at some point seen this in one form or another. If you right-click on, say, a music file in your computer and go to Properties and look at the summary, you will see several fields that provide you with information about the file. These fields include artist, title, album title, year, duration, copyright, where it's located on your hard disk, when it was created, file format, and so on and so forth. In some cases, you will find that it has empty fields that can be filled up by you, the user, as well. This applies to all kinds of files on a computer. Most of the information here is entered seemingly automatically. Here we see the file info of a .mp3 file, Blowin' in the Wind by Bob Dylan. It gives you the file type, its size, where it is, and the sample rate. You can try this for various files in your computer and see what you can discover about them. Under the comments, the user may enter their own descriptions or remarks. It closely resembles the details that you will find on the packaging of a food item or of a mobile phone. The difference lies in the fact that the latter is more like technical specifications regarding your product than data about data, although in some sense it is that too, depending on how you see the item of food. Besides, there is usually no information regarding the container. Any archive, library, or repository of information should be able to provide, along with the items on hold, some information about them, such as the name of the author, publisher, year and location of publication, number of pages, even perhaps the dimensions of a physical object. This helps us get a clear sense of whether or not we are indeed getting the book we wanted. If I want a particular edition, the index card should be able to guide me. This is from the National Library of India's web index. You can see everything about a particular title here, including the call number by which you have to requisition the particular book. While all this is very important, it's still a basic function of metadata. For more complex functions, take for example MIT's Project Immersion, which, like a cubist painting, presents users with a number of different perspectives of their email data. Immersion works exclusively with metadata to offer us an image of our email correspondences. It assures us that once you log in, Immersion will use only the from, to, cc and timestamp fields of the emails in the account you are signing in with. It will not access the subject or the body content of any of your emails. There is also the Iraq War logs and the Republic of Letters, of which Professor Shukanto Choudhury will tell you. This helps us understand that metadata itself can lead to interesting research, even if you disregard the content of the actual file or data set. To come down to some basics, what are the kinds of metadata and how it is created? In his video lecture, Dr. Shubroto Sinha will give you a concise introduction to the different kinds of metadata. But it's worth looking back at the few examples we have gone through to figure out the basic types. By types, we mean not the different styles of data recording, to which we'll come later, but rather the different categories of metadata. The three broad types are descriptive, structural, and administrative. When we say descriptive, we mean details about a particular object or file that aid the viewer in its identification. A photograph, for example, will be described with respect to its author, that is, photographer. Abstract, that is, what we see in the image. Title, that is, the name of the image if it's a painting, say Mona Lisa. And keywords. This data should ideally be recorded with as much objectivity as one can assume. A description should preferably not include any aesthetic judgment or prioritization. If there are two buildings in a frame, one of which is in the foreground, it is better to not exclude the presence of the other when describing the image in the metadata. This is simply because things appear differently to different persons, and one thing that may be important for one viewer may not be for another. A later viewer may be searching for something altogether different in the image. The keywords could include the event that is caught on the camera, say a birthday party, any locational markers, say someone's garden, etc. How does descriptive metadata help? If you are searching through an enormous number of images in an archive and you want to know if there's a picture of X, Y, or Z in them, how would you locate it? It's tedious to browse through all the images. But if there's a metadata sheet, you can search only that and then look up the image in the folder from the file name assigned to it. Any archive will still have a finite number of images. But think of the Google image search. If you search for Roberto Busa, you will find at one go an image of him, and his name is contained in the metadata related to that image, which is how Google locates it. It's obviously not as if Google knows Roberto Busa by his face. Not yet, at least. What then is structural metadata? Structural metadata refers to the internal logic of a compound form. Like in a book, it would describe how sentences, paragraphs, pages, chapters, parts of a book correlate to one another. And finally, there is administrative metadata. This refers to the management of a particular file. It offers information regarding its date of creation, date of access, storage, copyright, and so on. Things get a little confusing when we are archiving, say, a postcard of a famous painting. It would include the date of painting, the date of the photograph, when it was taken, etc. The date of accessing and archiving the photograph and the date of the birth of the digital image, that is, when the postcard was digitized. These may appear complex, but when one tries to work on metadata, these questions seem far more interesting and challenging. Many of you will be wondering, no doubt, whether it's possible to have one set of categories for all kinds of metadata. No, it's not. Naturally, you will not be able to input the same details for a song as you will for a digital image of a letter exchanged between two people. But there are some general principles. These general principles help us structure what we will or won't include in the metadata. Just as in any English sentence, there is a question of syntax, where the noun sits, how a verb follows it to make sense, and how an adjective may describe a noun with the preposition occupying a particular place. There is also a syntax of metadata. This enables easier comprehension across different archives and different recording practices. If we know that X follows and is related to Y in this particular fashion, we can make sense of even an unfamiliarly structured metadata sheet. Metadata may equally well be syntax independent. Some of the different syntaxes used are SGML, Standard Generalized Markup Language, and XML, Extensible Markup Language. The rules form schemes which archives follow. Among the most popular metadata schemes is the Dublin Core, which lays out a prescription of how metadata ought to describe a particular object. The Dublin Core was developed in 1995 at a workshop that took place in Dublin, Ohio. It has continued to develop since. One of the main aims of the Dublin Core was to maintain simplicity. It would not still compromise on diversity of information and rigor. There were 13 core elements that had been decided upon first, although the count stands now at 15. They are title, creator, subject, description, publisher, contributor, date, type, format identifier, source, language, relation, coverage, and rights. The reason for the Dublin Core's popularity is its clarity of thought and freedom. The Dublin Core allows interpretive freedom, that is, one can repeat each element. Date occurs in various columns, as explained earlier in the example of the postcard Mona Lisa, and some may even be left out. Thus, the elements can be divided up into narrower elements, or they may feed into and multiply along with other columns. Other forms of recording metadata may include the use of TEI, or the Text Encoding Initiative. TEI tries to encode information regarding a text within that text. So, in a passage of fiction, you may mark the character names with a tag, character, the dialogues with a quotation tag, quote, and so on. But that is so far as the metadata of the contents is concerned. Even before the body of a text appears, a TEI file may include a vast range of information in the header, which serves as a storehouse of metadata. An example is provided here, where you will find fields similar to the ones that appear in the Dublin Core format. We hope that the basics of metadata, why it is important, what is it exactly, and what are its different components and kinds, are by now clear to you. The video lecture will explain certain aspects in much greater detail and help your understanding of the concept.